Dr. Kristina Young and Dr. David Page are the two newest physician researchers to join our team. Both have already received national recognition. Here's a picture of them. They were among 27 ASCO Young Investigator Award winners in 2015. Kristina is an outstanding radiation oncologist and laboratory researcher, while David is a remarkable medical oncologist specializing in new immunotherapies for women with breast cancer. We are very fortunate to have attracted such wonderful young people to Providence to help us finish cancer. Please join me in welcoming Dr. David Page and Dr. Kristina Young, along with Laural Porter.
I had the pleasure of meeting these two about a week and a half ago, and they are so impressive. I want you all to get to know them a little bit better and what they're working on. I know you're going to be really excited about it. You've both been here about a year, so tell us a little bit about yourself and where you were before you came to Providence. Let's start with Kristina.
Well, thank you so much for having us, everyone. I grew up in Southern California. I attended UCLA for my undergraduate degree in chemical engineering. And when I was a freshman in college, my best friend's mother lost a long battle with breast cancer, and it was devastating to everyone who knew Barbara. And from that moment on, I really dedicated myself to cancer research and to treating patients who had cancer. So in 2003, I moved to Oregon. I attended OHSU for the combined MD Ph.D. program, and I stayed for my residency in radiation oncology. I was fortunate during my residency to have a dedicated protected time to do some postdoctoral research, which I did at the Early Child's Research Institute at Providence, Portland. I was recently hired on as faculty in 2015, and I've been very pleased with my decision. But really, I've been in Portland since 2003, and I feel like a Portland native in some ways. I was fortunate enough to meet my husband here, and 2 years ago this weekend, we welcomed our son, Griffin.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. And we've been very excited to embrace the Northwest lifestyle. We have an elaborate garden and
Gardening.
yeah, and we now even have 3 chickens.
Chickens! Oh, now you're official Portlander, right? They've got chickens, yeah. How about you, David?
So I grew up in upstate New York, and I also grew up with a garden. My grandfather actually was born in Italy, and for him, the most important thing of living was going to the backyard and picking some fresh vegetables. He also had grapes, and he made his own wine, and that was really a big part of my life. Every Sunday was spent with him, and I'll always remember that, and that's something that I love about life, is food and wine. So on the other side of my family, my great-grandfather opened a restaurant in 1929. The name of the restaurant was Page's Whistle Pig. And everyone thought that I would just stay in the business. I would take over that restaurant one day. And I actually thought that might be the case. But I decided to go to college in a different city. I went to Chicago. I took every class imaginable. I fell in love with 2 topics, immunology and cancer biology. So as you might guess, I decided to go to medical school. And I'll never forget a course that I took probably 2 years in, which was a course that told me that I could use the immune system to treat cancer. So that was my new passion, and I knew that's what I wanted to do at that point in time. I found a doctor in New York City. His name was Jed Walchuk. He's at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. Lo and behold, he's actually a good friend of Walter Erba. I didn't even know that at the time. And I emailed him, and I said I'd like to learn more, and he actually invited me to come to New York for 3 months as a medical student. I came, I saw some patients that were treated with immune therapy. I saw patients that were cured with metastatic cancer. So this was something that I would never forget for the rest of my life. And I chose to stay there. So I did my training there. I spent 3 years at Columbia and then 3 years at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center learning how to treat cancer using the immune system.
Well, we're so glad you didn't go into the family business and went into cancer research instead. Well, yes. I've seen both of their resumes. Their resumes are so long and so impressive. You could have gone anywhere to work, but why did you choose Providence, Kristina?
I was really impressed by Providence's dedication and commitment to radiation research. When I was looking for a position, there's some equipment that I need to do the research that I do, and one of those pieces of equipment is a linear accelerator, which delivers radiation that's built specifically to treat mice. So it's an elaborate, tiny, tiny machine. And Providence was one of the first 15 or so places in the country to acquire such an instrument, and it really showed their commitment to radiation research, which really impressed me and was absolutely fundamental in where I was going to choose to go. The other thing that really impressed me was that the Institute was founded with this idea of translating medicine from the bench to the bedside, which is sort of what the philosophy is of an MD Ph.D. training program, and so it really felt like a good fit for me. And an example of that is when I was doing my postdoctoral research, I was lucky enough to combine radiation with a novel immune therapy that showed some excellent results in mice that had rectal cancer. And when I joined the Cancer Institute in July, I really wanted to push this forward into patients for a clinical trial. And it's a really long process typically to get that to happen, but with the dedicated, committed staff at the Cancer Institute, we were able to get that trial up and running, and I'm happy to say it's the only place in the country where this trial is open, and it's a really great opportunity for patients to get access to this drug that they wouldn't otherwise have.
We're so glad that you picked us. And how about David? Why Providence?
Well, to be honest, I never would have guessed this a couple years ago because I fell in love with New York for many reasons. I met my lifelong partner there about 2 weeks after I went to New York, and the food and wine, it's really hard to beat.
We can compete, though. We can compete.
Yes, definitely. I had great mentors there. I was at one of the biggest cancer centers in the whole world, and I had people that really cared about my success. And I really put all the effort that I could possibly put into to get a job there because I thought that's where I belonged. And it took about 10 years, and I would say probably a year ago today, I got a job offer, which was an offer to be a faculty member at Sloan Kettering to do breast cancer immune therapy. And I was exasperated, but there was something holding me back. You know, having the offer in hand, I was like, this is what I worked for. There's something missing here. And what was it? I thought long and hard, and there were some experiences along the way that were not perfect. There were some people that I thought were my partners that were a little bit more competitive than I would have liked, and I realized that that's part of the culture of New York City and Sloan Kettering, and it just wasn't me. The other thing was I wanted a garden, and I wasn't going to get it. So
We win by the garden. Yeah.
So I actually met Walter at a meeting about 3 or 4 months before I got that offer, and he invited me to come visit, and I met all of the faculty members here. I met Kristina, and I saw that they all shared the same passion as me for immune therapy, and they all had gardens, pretty much all of them. So, you know, it was like a match that I could not be more thankful that I discovered, and I'm just very glad that I found it.
And you'll hear how collaborative these two are in just a moment. I know you're both working on some really exciting things. Tell us what you're working on now. What gets you excited in the morning to come to work, Kristina?
I split my time between the lab and the clinic, and really my inspiration is always my patients. I think I try to do my best by them every single day, and when I see a patient and I'm giving them the best that I have to offer and it's still not good enough, that really inspires me to go back to the lab and try to discover something new that I can really offer them or a future patient that might be better. And so that's really my main inspiration.
David?
Okay, same thing. When I see a patient in the clinic, I want the best for that patient, and that is the most important thing, but giving them standard of care just is not enough. And I think what excites me most is when I see a patient and I say, we can do better, and I have an idea for how we can make that treatment better. And the way that you turn those ideas into reality are clinical trials. And I just happen to love the challenge of designing a clinical trial to help a patient, and specifically patients that I'm treating in the clinic. So that's my full-time effort, is to design clinical trials to bring new therapies like immune therapy to the next generation. I specifically focused on breast cancer because I identified that there were just not that many people investigating immune therapy for breast cancer. That's 200,000 women a year in the United States alone. And I feel like we use a ton of chemotherapy, and I don't think we need to. I think in the future we'll be using a ton of immunotherapy. So on that note, I do share a lot of patients with Kristina, actually.
Yeah, and David and I, like you said, we share many patients with breast cancer, and we talk about our experiences treating those patients. We talk about our successes and sometimes our failures, and that really, creates a dialogue, and out of those conversations born some ideas, and we actually are now testing some novel ideas of immune therapy with radiation in mice that have breast cancer, and it's looking promising, and we're hoping to be able to translate that work to patients in the near future.
And you were inspired by something, weren't you, that Dr. Erba was working on?
So when I was in New York and I was seeing melanoma patients, there were two types of patients, the ones getting chemotherapy, and I just felt so sad because that's all that we had at the time, and they just did not benefit so much. Then there were the lucky patients on this immunotherapy clinical trial, and this was a trial of a drug called ipilimumab. And it happens that Walter Erba on the other side of the country was enrolling the same type of patient on the same trial, and it was my mentor in New York, Jed, who was collaborating with Walter. And not everyone was cured with that type of therapy, but that was the first immune therapy where we saw that about 20% of those patients may have been cured. And these are patients that after 8 years at Sloan Kettering were still alive and well. So this was the real inspiration, is to see that a collective effort between scientists with an idea could lead to cures in a disease that was otherwise incurable. So that's in particular why I want to do this for breast cancer, and much the same drugs that we're using for melanoma.
So what role does philanthropy play in the work that you do, Kristina?
I would say that philanthropy touches everything that I do. I mentioned earlier that the research equipment that I need to do my work was donated by philanthropic funds. I think generally research money comes from grants, from industry, and from philanthropy. And over the last decade, grant funding has been increasingly difficult to come by, and we've relied more heavily on philanthropy. And I think that the clinical trials that we run are extremely expensive, and to fund the outstanding clinical trials team that we have at Providence requires philanthropy, and I think it's just a critical portion to the work that we do.
How about you, David?
I agree with that, and I want to give an example. It's somewhat hypothetical, but it's founded on reality. So Kristina in the lab is doing an experiment, and she combines 2 immunotherapy drugs, and in mice, it just works amazingly. So 2 drugs. We want to do this in patients. The problem is the drugs are from different companies. So we go to company A and we tell them, we've got this great idea. Kristina showed that it worked in breast cancer in a mouse model, and they're on board with it. So they give us money. They give us enough money to support 2/3 of the trial, and then they give us the drug. And then we go to company B, and company B says, oh, it's a little bit too early for that. We need more data. We're not ready for this yet. So at that juncture, oftentimes trials will die, and we can't do this. We've got the data. We just can't bring it to humans yet. So when I was in New York, this actually happened, and this was right when I started fellowship. I had mentors that probably had a lot of connections, and they knew a lot of people in the community that had the resources to potentially fund trials. And we wanted to do a trial with ipilimumab. This is the same drug that improves survival in melanoma that I talked about with Walter. And the drug company said no. So what did? We went to the community, we found some donors, we bought the drug because it was approved already for melanoma, and we did the trial anyway. So that's the first trial in breast cancer, early stage breast cancer, using immune therapy to improve survival. And that's the first step. So we want our ideas to become reality, and I want to work with Kristina to come up with something and make it happen. And it's just almost inevitable that we may reach a scenario where we need philanthropic support to make a trial come to reality.
Let's take that a step further. I want you to imagine, what could Providence do with more philanthropic support, Kristina?
I really see the philanthropic funds helping in 3 ways. I think philanthropy is critical for novel equipment, for investigating new ideas and new pathways that we can exploit for research purposes. I think to support our clinical trial staff, as I mentioned. And I think the third and possibly most important way is to recruit new faculty members who are the best and brightest minds in the future of cancer research. We're really excited. We have a new faculty member that's going to start with us shortly, who we recruited from the National Cancer Institute, and he's bringing with him a new type of immune therapy to Providence that we haven't had previously. And the collaborations that we're going to have working with him are really going to expand the opportunities for patients and hopefully lead to some new opportunities and new ideas. And I think if we can expand on that and recruit more bright minds, I think that's really going to be what we can do in the future.
David?
So I foresee success. I know that we're going to have new drugs approved, and my prediction for 10 years from now is that we're going to have a number of drugs approved, and we're going to reach a point where the challenge isn't not having access to drugs. The challenge is picking the right drug for the right patient. So I think we have to take a step back and have foresight, and we have to ask the question, what could we do to be at the forefront of that, to be prepared to answer those questions when we have a patient and we've got 5 drugs to choose instead of 1. So one thing we could do is invest in new technologies. I think one of the reasons I came to Providence is because we really have taken the lead in developing new ways of analyzing patients' cancers to see what exactly it is about that cancer that's making it grow and how the immune system is interfacing with that cancer. So with those technologies, if we put the effort in, we need to get volunteers, of course. We need patients that are willing to donate their tumors and willing to get bloods collected. I think with some effort and with some support, we can find ways to predict which types of drugs are best for each individual patient, and that's called personalized medicine.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us. Thank you for your skills, your talent, your brilliance, and your devotion that you share with us at Providence. I think we have 2 of the brightest minds right here. We can't be in the lab with you, but we can certainly support you. Let's hear it for Drs. Kristina Young and David Page.